Welcome. You're listening to Boring History for Wondersoft World, a quiet journey into the dusty folds of the past, where the clamor of history is muffled, the swords have long since been sheathed, the noise of the world is gently replaced by something slower, softer, steadier. Tonight we journey to a time long past, a time of layered silk robes and stone lanterns, of wind rustling through bamboo groves, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of life in feudal Japan. But behind the delicate calligraphy and the gleaming curve of a katana lay truths far more complex, more tedious, more human. This episode is called The Hidden Truths of Samurai Life and More. For many, the word samurai brings to mind a kind of stoic perfection, masters of sword and code, bound by honor, fighting in misty duels beneath cherry blossoms. But the truth, as you'll soon discover, was often far less glamorous, and in many cases, deeply uncomfortable. In tonight's first chapter, we'll begin not with a mighty warrior, but with a man who had no master, a Ronin. Why it sucked to be a Ronin. Imagine yourself waking with the first hint of gray in the sky. The faint call of a distant rooster echoes through narrow wooden alleys, and the chill of morning air seeps into your threadbare robe. You are a Ronin, a masterless samurai. Once a proud warrior in the service of a noble house, but now little more than a wandering man with a sword and nowhere to belong. In a society built entirely upon loyalty, hierarchy, and order, to be a Ronin is to be out of step with the rhythm of your time. No stipend, no meals served at a lord's hall, no formal duties. You walk and you wait. Sometimes you teach swordplay to merchants' sons. Sometimes you guard a sake shop through the night. More often, you beg quietly, with eyes lowered, hoping the shame doesn't sting quite so sharply today. The Tokugawa period, which began in the early 1600s, brought peace to Japan. The wars were over, and in peace, the sword was sheathed. This meant fewer battles, fewer heroes, and thousands of former warriors suddenly had nothing left to do. Some turned to philosophy, some to ink and paper, but many simply wandered. Picture the alleyways of Edo, present-day Tokyo. Ronin slept beneath overhangs and temples, carving what little warmth they could from communal baths or generous monks. They were still armed, yes, but that sword brought more suspicion than respect. A weapon without a banner. It's a dangerous thing in a peaceful land, and so you learn to keep your head bowed. You perform odd jobs. You recite poetry when asked. You do lonely when you must. You hear of others like you selling their blades in back alleys, or worse, falling into crime. The code of Bushido, the way of the warrior, still hums quietly in your heart. But what good is honor when rice is more useful than virtue? It wasn't just poverty. It was liminality. Being trapped in a space between classes above the farmer, yet beneath respect. The samurai had prestige. The merchant had money. You had neither. The shame of being a Ronin weighed heavier than your sword. Some scholars wrote that the Ronin were like drifting clouds, beautiful perhaps, but rootless, transient, and often forgotten. There are records of Ronin taking up work as bodyguards, gamblers, actors, anything to fill the day. At times you may find yourself reminiscing about the rituals of your past life, the ordered meals, the click of sandals in the Lord's courtyard, the morning drills in the courtyard. Now, your days have no pattern, your meals depend on luck, and your dignity is worn thin. But every once in a while, you tighten your grip on the hilt of your sword and remember what it felt like to be a servant of something greater. You still bow to shrines, you still polish the blade, you still wait for redemption, for employment, or simply for sleep to come and relieve you. Such was the life of many Ronin, not rogues or rebels, but echoes of a fading age. Let us now walk forward in time to a story where Ronin rose not in shame, but in vengeance, a tale known across Japan and beyond. Let's turn our attention to the legendary fate of the 47 Ronin. The death of the 47 Ronin. You are now in Edo. It is the early 1700s, a city of wood and paper, where the lanterns flicker in narrow streets and the scent of pine mingles with the smoke from cooking fires. In a quiet compound behind gates of cedar and stone, 47 men kneel. Their heads are bowed. Their robes are clean. Their swords rest beside them, not drawn, but present. They are not criminals. They are not warriors in battle. They are something far more complicated. They are Ronin. But unlike others who drift and fade, these Ronin have just etched themselves permanently into the fabric of Japanese history. Their story is one of honor and vengeance. In the slow, quiet march toward death, it begins with a lord, Asano Naganor, a young daimyo of the Ako domain. His duty? To receive and host emissaries from the imperial court, but this task was delicate, complex. And for such things, lords turned to masters of protocol. In this case, to a man named Kira Yoshinaka. Kira was known to be difficult, proud, perhaps even corrupt. He expected gifts, bribes, really, from the lords he instructed. Lord Asano, by contrast, was sincere, unpolished, and critically unwilling to pay. Their interactions grew tense. Whispers say that Kira insulted Asano, repeatedly questioning his manners, mocking his intelligence, even cursing his name. Then, one spring day, inside the corridors of Edo Castle, Asano snapped. In an act that defied every law of decorum, he drew his short blade and slashed at Kira. Kira survived. Asano did not. It was forbidden, deeply forbidden, to draw steel within the shogun's palace. By sunset, Lord Asano had taken his own life. His lands were seized, his household disbanded, and his samurai became Ronin, 47 of them. Now, most Ronin, when cast out, fade into quiet desperation. But not these men. Led by Jishi Yoshio, the former chamberlain of Asano's household, they waited, not for days, not for weeks. But for nearly 2 years, they scattered. They disguised themselves as laborers, monks, drunkards. They lulled their enemies into forgetting them. Jishi himself took to wandering the streets of Kyoto, allegedly drunk and disgraced. Historians believe this was a ploy, a careful performance to throw off suspicion. And then, on a cold, snowy night in January of 1703, they struck. Kira's estate was breached with precision. The guards were subdued, the household awoken, and Kira was finally found, hiding in an outhouse. The Ronin gave him one final chance to die with honor by his own hand. He refused, and so they took his head. But vengeance was not justice. And while the people of Edo whispered in admiration and poems were penned in their honor, the shogunate faced a dilemma. If they let the Ronin live, it would be seen as approval for private revenge. If they executed them, it might ignite public unrest. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Ronin were not treated as criminals. They were allowed to die with honor. Each man was granted the right of seppuku ritual suicide. And on a quiet day in early spring, 47 warriors knelt in rows, slid open their robes, and fulfilled the final act of their code. They were buried beside their Lord Asano at Sengaku-ji Temple. Even today, visitors bring incense, flowers, and poems to their graves. But the story has never been simple. To some, the Ronin were the embodiment of loyalty. To others, they were dangerous men who flouted the law. For us tonight, they are a reminder that even in a peaceful era, even after the wars have ended, honor can still demand a quiet, deliberate death. Now we turn our gaze from vengeance and legend towards something older, quieter, and more mysterious. A ritual far more ancient, a people nearly forgotten. It's time to uncover the secrets of the Ainu. The secrets of the Ainu people before the shoguns, before the cherry blossoms were praised in poetry, before the samurai and their polished blades defined an era. There were others, quiet people, fur-clad, forest-dwelling. They called themselves the Ainu. And though they lived in the same archipelago we now call Japan, their language, customs, and spirit were entirely their own. Tonight we slip further north, into the mists of Hokkaido, to the rivers, valleys, and birchwood homes of a people who thrived in the cold. Their voices were soft, but their traditions ran deep. Imagine waking up in an Ainu village. The wind howls across the thatched rooftops. Inside your homasize, made of woven reeds and bark, you tend the fire, not for light, but for warmth. The winters here are long and unforgiving. You drink something warm, perhaps, a broth made from salmon bones. Your clothing is hand-woven from elm bark fibers. It's decorated with curling patterns believed to protect you from spirits. This is no mere design. This is protection. The Ainu were animists. They believed that everything Every river, tree, animal, even tools, had a spirit kami. There was the fire spirit, the bear spirit, the owl spirit, each one deserving of respect. And so, rituals marked every part of life. Before hunting a deer, you whispered an apology. Before chopping wood, you gave thanks. If a bear cub was raised among you, it was not as a pet, but as a divine guest. In a ritual called Ayomante, the bear would be lovingly raised, fed, and honored, and then ceremonially returned to the spirit world. To outsiders, this seemed brutal, but to the Ainu, it was reverence in its purest form. Their language, now nearly lost, was unlike Japanese. Soft consonants, repeating vowels, words that evoked nature and time. They fished for salmon in icy rivers, hunted with poisoned arrows, and carved stories into wooden staffs. They wore tattoos, especially the women. Lines etched around the mouths and hands, not for beauty, but for protection. These traditions puzzled the rulers in the south, and over time, as Japan unified under the Tokugawa and later Meiji governments, the Ainu were increasingly seen not as neighbors, but as subjects, then as obstacles. Their lands were colonized, their customs outlawed, their language silenced. Well, but they did not vanish. Even today in the modern cities of Hokkaido, you'll find Ainu elders teaching their songs, their dances, and the meanings behind their patterned robes. There are museums, revivals of the Ayomante ritual, the echo of a long-suppressed voice returning to the wind. So why speak of the Ainu here in a tale of samurai? Because even in the most structured societies, there are people who live beyond the edge of the map, not as rebels, not as enemies, but as witnesses to a different kind of life, a quieter one. Now we leave the wild forests behind and walk once again into the world of silk screens, polished wood, and rituals of privilege. Let us visit the other side of feudal life, where lords do not serve, but are served. It's time to enter the halls of Edo's aristocracy. The leisure life of Edo aristocrats. We end our journey tonight not in the muddy streets, nor in the snowy forests of the north, but behind paper doors, where the air smells of incense and lacquered wood, and silence is a choice, not a necessity. You are now within the residence of an Edo aristocrat. The year is 1785. The city Edo, the shogunal capital. Bustling, layered, yet strangely organized. But here, inside these private walls, the world is calm. You wake late, your bedina. Futon laid upon polished tatami matsas, already been folded by servants. Outside the sliding shoji screen, a garden waits, not large, but curated. Each stone placed with intent, each pond ripple balanced like a breath. You do not rise for work, you rise for ritual. Your robe-embroidered silk slides over your shoulders without resistance. An attendant bows silently, bringing warm water to rinse your hands. There is no rush. The world outside may move quickly, but here time unfolds, like a fan. A typical day might begin with poetry. You sit near the veranda, brush in hand, and write a verse about a plum blossom, or about the way the moonlight reflects off your lacquerware dish. If you are a patron of the arts, you may meet with a painter or select new ceramics for your tea collection. Letters arrive. One from a cousin in Kyoto. One from your son, away at a Confucian academy. You do not read them aloud. They are unfolded carefully, the characters admired as much for their form as for their meaning. A meal follows. Small plates, pickled vegetables, steamed rice, a single slice of grilled fish, all served with minimal gesture and no speaking less to complement the arrangement. In the afternoon you may host guests. Conversation moves slowly. Polite inquiries about health, the latest verses in a seasonal poetry contest, or the silk dyeing techniques from Kyoto. Servants serve green tea, bitter, frothy, prepared with the precision of a sacred rite. The tea ceremony itself may take hours. It's not for the tea, but for the silence. It is a form of communication more refined than words. If evening falls without obligation, you may play the koto, a stringed instrument, delicate and resonant. Or you may take a walk in your garden, not for exercise, but to observe the koi fish moving in half circles beneath the lilies. Your thoughts drift not toward war, nor hunger, nor rank, but toward harmony, a concept called wa. to live beautifully with restraint, to leave no mark. And yet, beneath this carefully balanced life, there are tensions. You do not rule. The shogun does. You do not work. But your wealth is finite. You marry for alliance, not for love. And every gesture, every glance, every silence carries consequence. Still, this life, with all its unspoken rules and quiet elegance, is one that millions dreamed of. While peasants toiled in the rice fields, while Ronin wandered for food, and while the Ainu tended fires far to the north, the aristocrats of Edo moved through a world padded with ceremony, one that was safe, slow, and strangely weightless. As you close your eyes tonight, you've walked through many paths, along muddy roads with the disgraced Ronin, through snowy forests with the Ainu, into the pages of tragedy with the 47 warriors, and now into chambers of incense and silence. History is not only wars and kings, it is also routines, waiting and wanting. It is the life that slipped between the scrolls, and that now, in quiet, comes back to you. Sleep well, traveler. You've made it through another long and beautifully boring night in history.